In every system, there's a signal, a pulse, a spark that cuts through the noise. Some call it innovation. Some call it disruption. We call it the protocol. Welcome to the grid, where ideas illuminate, where technology bends and reshapes the world around us, and where the future isn't predicted. It's engineered. Here, we decode the frameworks behind extended reality, AI, and spatial computing. We trace the lines between creativity and code, between human intention and digital possibility. This is where builders, thinkers, and explorers step out of the shadows and into the neon to share the systems, the stories, and the sparks that shape tomorrow's tech. So plug in, power up, and follow the signal. This is Neon Protocol.
Tonight on Neon Protocol, we're diving straight into the systems shaping what comes next. I'm Gene Feldman, and also joining me tonight is Ron Thompson and Mark Grob. And we're the Neon Protocol team members exploring XR, AI, spatial computing, and the various infrastructures that make them real. We're here to break down what's working, what's changing, and what's about to break open. And on tonight's show, we have Annie Eaton. She's a founder, author, and a longtime immersive tech leader whose work has shaped how organizations adopt XR, build ethical frameworks, and really design human-centered experiences. Annie's been pushing this industry forward for more than a decade, so this is going to be a really fun one. And we're excited to bring her in and introduce herself and jump right into the conversation.
Aw, thank you so much, Gene. I am excited to be here and talking with y'all today. You can hear the y'all. That's my Atlanta, Georgia coming out. But no, yeah, to introduce myself, I guess I'll start at the beginning of my VR journey, which was back in the 2013-2014 Oculus Kickstarter days. A former coworker of mine who ended up being the co-founder of Futurus, he introduced me to VR. We were working at another company at the time, and he was a backer of the Kickstarter and brought it into the office. I had a marketing background and was one of the few people to actually listen and take him seriously. And while we tried to pitch it internally at that company, y'all know how that goes. Sometimes it was not a good thing. So unfortunately, not a path there, but we ended up starting the Atlanta Virtual Reality Meetup group there together. And from that came business opportunities. People who were VR enthusiasts at night, had day jobs at big companies, and they wanted to know how they could use it too. So we took what we weren't getting from our own organization, started doing some light consulting and prototyping for other companies, and started a company. And it was kind of a fly by the seat of your pants moment. I don't think either of us knew exactly how to start a company or what to do, but we did it, and it evolved. Things have changed over the years. It was kind of a do anything and everything to make a buck kind of thing at the start. And then we got the opportunity and privilege to be able to choose what projects we wanted to work on. And although we kind of parted ways back in 2021, the company made a shift around that same time to be focused on immersive training. So we are almost exclusively training simulations at this point, but have done some augmented reality projects over the years. I like to say AR actually saved the company multiple times. When people weren't investing in VR, typically they were investing in AR, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed ever since. And now we've got a couple upcoming AR projects, which is wild to say again, because I didn't think I'd ever say that again. So excited to just keep an eye on, what things are changing, the trends as they come and go, and we're still here 12 years later.
Fantastic. Well, let's go ahead and start. You actually said something I actually found kind of interesting, the ebb and flow. So how, because that is a common argument as people are getting into it is, which technology do I go for? Do I go for the full VR headset? Do I go for augmented reality? Do I go for a mobile device? And now with Meta and the display glasses and DigiLens and all these other makers coming out, does that ebb and flow? Do you think you'll ever fully commit, or where do you see it right now? I saw the I saw that smile.
You
So
saw the smirk.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the ebb and flow has not only come from my inability to focus on one thing for too very long, but also as a business decision. Because with emerging technology, I have found that if you put too many eggs in one basket, you're going to get screwed over. So I know we're trying to be casual here. I'm saying, you can get screwed over. That's
No,
cool,
it's
right, Gene?
this
All
is
right,
that
we're
type
getting
of
real.
podcast.
Okay, so it was not rough start, but just a very slow start. The history of Futures is that we have remained independent the entire time of our existence. So we don't have big or more traditional investors. It was really just bootstrapped from the start. And so while at the beginning and honestly still to this day VR is like my true technology love. That is like the main one that I want to focus on. As a business, we've had to find other ways to make money. And we had a client, Georgia Pacific, who we had done some VR prototyping for back in 2015. That company said, another department was like, "Oh, you're already a vendor. Can you do AR too?" And of course, I'm like, "Yeah, we can. Small business, very little revenue. Yes, we can." And of course, we proved it. We made a prototype. We did, went through the sales meetings. We weren't just saying we could do something that we couldn't do because I would never do that. But I think with all of this technology, always keeping an eye on the complementary technologies and making sure that you're at least educating yourself on the possibilities so that you can diversify if you need to has really been our saving grace throughout the years. Luckily, that marketing department let us do an AR Dixie Cups project that was a national campaign. It was associated with the physical cups themselves. It was a kid's toothbrushing timer. And now that I have a toddler, I know how valuable that is. Now I understand why so many people used it. And that was really our first major AR project. But as soon as people want VR, I'm jumping right back over there. So the ebb and flow has not only been because the skill set is fairly shared, so we didn't have to staff up. It was really just a shifting of resources, but also because of survival. And it's weird, like when AR goes up, VR goes down a little, and vice versa. So I feel very grateful that we're able to serve both of those markets.
No, I think that's great because one of the things that I kind of always push back on, everyone talks about AR and the AR glasses being the final goal, the final form. But there's still, to me, I find there's a lot of advantages that full VR, especially in training and development or in simulations, can give you that AR I don't think could ever accomplish, at least just within the 360 view alone. So I don't know. What are you thinking on that?
Yeah, I would agree, and something that I also make sure of is, like, not to push someone in one direction just because, that's the realm you're working in. If I don't feel like it's a good VR project, I'm not just gonna say it's a VR project for do it for the sake of doing it. But something that a lot of companies don't realize and what we try to educate on is you can reuse a lot of those assets across both. The 3D models do have to be optimized. They have to run typically on a mobile framework if they're not using PC VR, which I don't know many people who are still using PC VR outside of like really heavy rendering necessity. But yeah, I feel like they're so complementary. I would never really put one over the other. I would think of it as you're leveraging the same pool of assets and you're just using them in a different way that serves a different need.
No, good point. No, really good point. Because I mean, yeah, because I often start thinking, and it's one of the questions I get, and I'm sure we all get it as people are starting their journey. What do I start with? They're looking at not only an aisle of AR versus VR, but now within each sector, there's the devices that kind of run the rampant of, okay, this, do you want now the Vision Pro or do you want the Quest, the Quest headset? And then it gets into, where that you can even buy them or even get them at some points.
Yeah, yes, there are a lot of logistics that go on with the whole process, and that is another thing that I hope people aren't too hesitant about once they learn there are options out there and people to help them with that. And I'm not just talking about myself. Like we've had a really good experience lately using a company called VR Expert that does the provisioning for you. And there are others like it as well. I think Knox Labs is another. But there are companies that sole purpose is to take that burden off of someone or an organization. And when you don't have to worry about the hardware and the setup and all of that, you get to think about the creative aspect of it and the fun part of it. Now, you mentioned that where should people start? And yeah, there's no right answer for that. This might be a controversial opinion, but I actually think VR is an easier place to start because you have more control. So with augmented reality, you have to deal with reality. And that could be a great thing in many cases, especially if you're doing an augmented work instruction or something that requires the physical world. But when you're doing a proof of concept or you're doing something that where you're just trying to kind of show the possibilities, sometimes a very small scope virtual reality project is a better way to go. And it's because you can control everything in that scene. You can also bring it with you. So we have one client where we've done a lot with their manufacturing machinery. We had virtual reality training, and then we had an augmented reality training simulate, well, I guess app as well, where they're able to see pinch points and hazards on the physical machinery itself with AR overlays. But that experience they can't take out. Like they can't bring it anywhere, they can't show it to anyone because all of it's overlaid and mapped to the machine. We did a workaround where we have like a hologram of the machine to be able to bring it out. You can see it AR set up with a hologram of the machine with all the points. But the only reason we could do that was because we had the full machine modeled in its entirety for VR. So I do think that VR is a great place to start for people who need that control, because when you can create a whole scene and have really every single aspect of it programmed to how you need it to be programmed, it's a great way to start.
Nice.
So, yeah, Annie, on that note, when would you say your VR products were most successful? Was it focused on a hardware platform or was it more focused on the solution and the experience? And then you sort of chose what was the right platforms to present it on? Which one?
Yeah, absolutely focusing on the right experience and the right use case. A lot of times, identifying something that is causing an organization a large amount of loss, whether it's lost time, lost money, unfortunately, loss of either life or injury. Those really are the roots of what makes a successful product. I know my hardware partner friends are going to be mad about this, but like they're interchangeable more or less. They all have their strengths, they all have different price points. I mean, any of them could be good. And I'm talking about, I guess, specifically VR with the major players like Pico, Meta, HTC, Samsung. So, like, how we have structured our deployments at this point is we have a solid similar code base that's developed in Unity, and we can build to any single one of those because of systems that we've set up. So you're no longer really tied to the hardware, which is great. Like I have some clients that have Pico and Meta devices. Some of them are legacy devices that they've had, they still want to support because they don't need new hardware because it's still working great. But they want, this other brand for newer devices. So being able to support multiple is also nice when you can. But yeah, all of it's rooted in the solution itself. I feel like again the hardware is similar enough that it doesn't matter as much as the purpose and the problem that you're solving with the content itself.
Nice. So, as we're talking about all the hardware and all that, so I'm actually going to throw in a trend because as we're talking about the ebbing and flowing, so I actually had a mission to get to this conversation topic because so as we're trying to continue to build momentum for XR and VR, AR, all of that, we've had a couple really good applications that we could always point to that everybody could get, even though we're all in deep in our own little worlds of whether it's manufacturing or training. There's always been a couple such as Ready Player Me that we could point to as this is how avatars are built. Well, now Netflix owns it. Then we could point to Rec Room. Everybody knows Rec Room. It's the social network. It's gone. And so for me, and I actually saw an article. I didn't read it yet, but I saw an article posting on what was the why do we think the demise of Rec Room? And I thought, as we're talking about this ebb and flowing, and especially with Rec Room being so big and helping, whether we liked it or not, I think it helped sell our use case and helped sell our story because we had children getting into it, and then a lot of those children now are actually in the industry because where it started. So, so let's just throw this out there. Let's just drop a grenade right on us all. What do we think? I mean, why do we think it collapsed?
I mean, it's like a flying too close to the sun thing. I feel like I mean, I loved Rec Room. We had a Futurus game room in Rec Room. We had played laser tag in there. We used to do a game of the month, and, like, every other month, we'd probably do it in Rec Room. So, yeah, that news was so sad. I guess that was last week. I and this is earlier, I was talking about how we're independent and we've been able to maintain our independence, and I realize with a platform like Rec Room, it's almost impossible to do that. But the majority of the companies I have seen shutter are ones that took way too much money, hired way too many people, and flew too close to the sun. And that is why I am vigilant about us maintaining our independence as long as possible because, like, a lot of the challenges where investors are coming saying, "Where is my money?" and these platforms still don't have a solid monetization strategy. It may be an incredible user experience. They have, millions and millions of players, but if they can't make money, eventually someone's gonna pull the plug. So, I'm not necessarily saying there's, like, a clear way around that for their situation, but it happens time and time again. Like, we keep seeing it happening, and it's devastating to all of us because we all want these platforms to like, we want this to succeed. We all are working so hard at it. So, I don't know. I'm not, like, saying, "Shame on you for taking investors." I'm just saying, like, people and I was a part of it as well early on in my company, the message from any advisor I talked to, anyone in the technology space, like, I was pretty active in the Atlanta startup scene. It's all gotta pitch, you gotta raise money, you gotta do this, and, like, people push that so far down your throat when you start a tech company that you feel like that's the only way, and it's not. So,
Yeah,
my
I
2
always look.
cents.
No, no. I mean, I kind of agree because I mean, I always look at it is with a lot of these companies, they become there's. I look at it from my old college days. I was grocery rich and grocery poor. Okay. The last day right before payday, I had maybe a cup of ramen noodles. If I was lucky, two or three oyster crackers, And but the day after, grocery day, even now, grocery day is a big day in my house. I will spend all day snacking because I'm grocery rich. But what I've tend to notice is these companies that when they start getting the money, they start like you said, kind of growing bigger, but to me, their appetite gets too big. I guess the same way as saying flying too close to the sun. And but what I also tend to notice, and this is where I kind of wonder too, is because Rec Room, a lot of companies used it. There were schools that were using it, but also it I think it suffered from like what Xbox Live suffers from in that there's no moderation. I mean, I remember a couple times when I would go into Rec Room because there was a really cool Nostromo recreation of the alien ship from the first Alien movie, which I absolutely love. And somebody even put aliens hidden in there that you could go find. But you would get in there and it was just a group of toddlers just screaming off the top of their lungs. And it kind of defeats the purpose and now you have Meta Horizon. So where's social media going to go with this too?
Oh, Gene, can I get a correction there? You said Rec Room, not Meta Workspaces or Meta Horizon technology. You're saying the same thing to me when I think about those platforms.
No, absolutely.
Average age of 14 and, moms yelling at them to get off the headset. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the other aspect to this is also flying too close to the sun. It's the aspect of, right? I was hearing some bonker numbers around record paying creators to do stuff, right? Whether it's like in a different way than something like Roadblocks, right? We can talk about Roadblocks too, but it's specific to like Rec Room, right? It was a case where it was like I kind of equated it to like the early days of YouTube, right? Where like YouTube directly cut you a check as a creator versus sort of now it's all automated, it's fractions of a penny. Maybe we can pull Ron on this because Ron's usually good at this stuff. Hey Ron, do you have a comment about this?
Yeah, there's a lot of views on when to take outside money, the valuations and the terms of it all. When we invest, it's very much a collaborative initiative because we don't want to run the company, but we want to help the founders make good decisions and to be aware of their options and the trade-offs and things like that. So we highly encourage the company to stay independent as long as possible and become self-sufficient until there's a major inflection point where you can justify getting $5 or $10 million and maybe giving up 20%.
Do
So,
you
so,
guys?
but
I was gonna say,
okay,
just
let's
say,
go because we come in early. And
yep.
so the whole thing we're trying to do is with the founders is usually they're very good with the technology or with a market focus or some domain thing. The thing is to start a business, as Annie mentioned at the start, there were some things they knew, many things they didn't. And this is classic. So we come in and try and help identify where they're strong and be supportive of that. But where there's a deficiency, or where there's weaknesses or blind spots, and how can we shore those up? So Kale is a value-added investor. We can come in and provide insights in this kind of stuff, and if requested, help in different areas to augment founder capabilities until they can justify a full-time person or some other partner thing they could do to beef up their capabilities and fast track progress and increasing product appeal, and really in the end to uh, get the company to scale, fast track, sales, and validate the business model and things like that.
But Ron and Annie, what is your feeling on a lot of these meta companies, right? We heard, right? They were getting subsidized. So Meta, the hardware maker, was literally subsidizing the studio. It makes me wonder, right? Is Rec Room part of this story? Or is it a case of, they just made the choice and it didn't work out? What would be your advice to startups where they're sort of sitting on that? Do they go with like a hardware specific subsidy program? Like, those developer programs will say, oh, we'll give you $200,000 to make a video game that only gets sold on our store. Or how would you guys advise that, Annie and Ron?
Annie, you
Goodness.
want to start?
Sure. I mean, those can be a double-edged sword than handcuffs. I am like just extremely cautious about any sort of exclusivity, which for my business, which is not gaming, I started a gaming studio in 2020. We did an early access game. It came out, it still had thousands of players, but like we don't maintain it. I just didn't feel like we could continue to invest in it. So I've been through the gaming in some capacity. I feel like the exclusivity though for my business would have been a big no-no. Like, we have gotten so much benefit from having relationships with all of the platforms and being fairly agnostic that I don't know. And this is just how my business is, so I cannot speak for others. I feel like there are a lot of different ways to find money, whether it is investors, whether it is programs like that developer program you mentioned, or even, business loans or lines of credit, which you have to have a business before you can get those. So that's a little tougher. That's a longer term thing, but like there are alternatives. And I would just encourage anyone who's being approached with an opportunity like that to evaluate all of their options before committing and giving that exclusivity away.
Yeah, and honestly, I think you bring up a good point that I don't think we're at the inflection point of exclusivity. In the video game, it was always Sega versus Nintendo. There was only two players. So being exclusive, Apple or Android, I just blanked out of that one, but there was always two. You go into the XR space, there's too many to choose from. And so, like I'll admit I was exclusive to Meta for years at the company I was at. And now with Meta pulling back a second time from enterprises, it killed any chance of any future project I could have had.
Yeah.
And so I think you bring up great points on that.
But I will say for gaming, I mean, Meta is who I would go to for VR gaming. I still do personally. I got my Meta Quest 2 behind me right here, still that I play Beat Saber on. So for gaming, it is different. And that game we released, it's called Loam. It is a virtual gardening game. We were gonna have it paid. We ended up making it free. We have not pushed an update to it in probably over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. We still get almost 200 players a month and it's free. So like free to download, free to play because we never ended up monetizing it. But the fact that a game with no marketing, very little discoverability is still getting that many downloads. And I can see on it, the attrition people who are playing it day over day, like we still have daily active users, which is wild to me. Cause it's like, I
They're
mean, you
not
can play it
employees.
kind of infinitely. You can play it
Yeah.
infinitely because it's a gardening game and a decorating game. You can still make money, and we've designed it to be able to play infinitely. But it's crazy to me that for people saying like, VR is failing or whatever, that my game that has zero chatter about it at all is still getting that many players a month. I know 200 players a month is not new players a month isn't crazy compared to like these others, but that's with nothing.
Yeah.
So, and I saw a report, I can't remember, it was 2025. It was put out directly by Meta, but they had released that revenue for the like gaming store side of everything exceeded 2024 in 2025. So like it's growing. The enterprise side is so wonky. These platforms are shutting down. It seems disastrous, but I don't really think it's as disastrous as the news makes it out to be.
No, I think some of it too is content. I think if you have the right content, you'll bring people over. I mean, like, I'm still surprised that nobody has ever created a Tron game, a game made for VR in VR. Or, I mean, they've gotten
There
close to
was a
like,
Tron's light bike game in Horizons. I played it. Yep.
yeah, I know like what Spatial has a couple like Star Wars games that you can now play, but it's creating content that's really meant for those devices, and so I don't know. Anyways, Ron, your thoughts on all this?
As usual, there's multiple ways of making money and mitigating risk and so forth. So a lot depends on the founder preferences and the uh, brain trust, with outside people involved and things like that. Because the case for exclusivity is if they will heavily subsidize the product to you, and or they will bring you many sales leads, or they will go with you on sales calls or make soft introductions or things like that. It shows that they're aggressive about trying to scale their business, and you're basically leveraging that strategy with them. Uh, so even if you start off doing that, there really is nothing to stop you at some point because you are independent, putting your software onto other platforms, other hardware devices, either because of new market opportunities or because someone else is even more aggressive again, or they simply have a better product, or it's got a separate niche. So you as a software player, you got to kind of gauge, how you divvy up your resources and what your short-term or longer-term strategy is to scale the business. So, there's a case of going for the low-hanging fruit and then kind of going from there, or you kind of stick to your guns. I want to be agnostic no matter what, and you can pursue that. It might take you a while to get as much traction as someone who really wants to go for it. But there's no right or wrong here. It's just a case of which way you want to build the business and which way you think you can make the most money and, better serve customers and, create partnerships and build ecosystems. Because in the end, as an independent company, you need to have multiple ways of creating and monetizing value and your go-to-market capabilities and so forth. And this whole thing around ecosystems is a really important strategy for companies, no matter how big they are, to get customers and have more ways to deliver value to them. So even if they come in with a partner who has other partners doing other things, at some point when they get into like the AR, VR, XR type stuff, then you will get consideration. And if they're getting into immersive technologies or adding intelligence to processes or defining new processes in general or new ways that they want to make money, and you can show relevance to that, then you get an opportunity. And this goes, this is endless. And so that's why you need to be open-minded in terms of, how you go to market and how you create and monetize value, who you go to market with and things like that. What you got to be careful of is uh, the people with a silver tongue and the people who overly promise, or you suspect they're bad actors, or you can't trust them. Because, you can spend years building up your reputation, make one bad connection, and nothing travels like bad news. And so part of what we see is working with these founders is because they're usually so good with the technology or with their focus, that they can really do that. And if nothing bad happens, then great. But usually at some point, you're going to get surprised. And having people around who can kind of have another perspective on things. And it's as simple as just asking some questions and just another perspective. And you go back to those people with some, insights of what's going on or what your aspirations are, or some metrics, or just some things about where they're going with their technology, where they see the future. And basically, it seems like it's unfolding naturally and easily and understandably, and we can all, it's going to get better over time. Or are they hypothecating and jerking you around and saying what you want to hear just to get your attention or things like that? There's a lot of these different things that go on. And dealing with technology and money, there's lots of, false hopes and ill-conceived strategies and people talking through their hat. The problem is some of these people have silver tongues. They can sound really good.
Ron, you're saying
Well-
validation isn't key to having a successful business? What?
That's correct. Validation, and there's multiple ways of getting it. So one of the things that we like to highlight is when you're going down this path of newness with new services, new technology, new markets, new business models, things like that, you can come across a duck. So, Mark, you know how a duck walks. You know how a duck quacks. I know how it looks. And Annie might know some other aspect of a duck. So when you have this brain trust with different perspectives, and we all think it's a duck, it's probably a duck. But even then, you can get surprised the other time. Worse is that you think that say, Mark, okay, it's definitely a duck because it's got two legs, because that's how you look at ducks. Well, there's lots of
like AI. Come on.
Yes, exactly.
AI. It has AI. Come on.
Exactly. So therefore, it must be good and stuff. So we just like to kind of get that out on the table with how we look at things, different perspectives, and just how to test hypotheses, and just how to get to inflection points. Because you get to these why in the roads, as we call them. One path takes you to the next level of business opportunities and build a business. Another over a cliff. So you have to know when to run to, build the business up. You kind of got to know when to walk, or you can identify the symptoms that there's a hedge there, and beyond the hedge is a cliff. So we're not going down that path. We can tell from 100 yards away that's the wrong way. So
But if we're a duck, we can fly.
What's that?
If we're a duck, we can fly.
Actually, maybe, but you're gonna get yourself in a bind at some point.
I will say, though, to Ron's point about these differing perspectives, and what I'm guessing he's alluding to is trusting people with more experience than you. I could have definitely benefited from that earlier on in my company. Like, I thought I knew everything. I think most founders, when they're starting out, think they know everything. And it's a great lesson to learn that you don't know everything, but it is also painful. But it's also a rite of passage. So I feel like you're
Absolutely.
speaking to me like 12 years ago, and I hear it. I hear it now with a very different mentality. Like, I'm just like, man, Annie, just slap her.
And give you a heads up is that we all know a lot about this much. The problem is there's this much to know. And even if you go from here to here, yeah, I know double what I did, but you're still a fraction of what you need to know. Because you're in the technology space where it's changing and new market opportunities emerge, new business model, and. It's constantly expanding. So even though you might have doubled your knowledge, you're still a small fraction of what you need to go from here.
Absolutely.
This is what from technology and opportunities and assessing risk. And this business is all about perceiving and managing risk.
And I can say as a spectator, Annie, I've got to see your company grow over the past probably about 6 or 7 years. That we've known each other. I think for about 3 or 4, but I've always been in the same presence with your company and watching it grow from this little company to now your book. In all honesty, I mean, I know we haven't talked a lot about it, and we've got about 10 minutes left, but I think this is a great opportunity because one of the things that I think is that you did a fantastic job is you did the one thing all of us were too lazy to do, which is write down all these lessons learned. I mean, reality, it was like you captured everything that, we've heard Bob Stone talk about over years, things that, we've heard either Meta or we've heard other companies share their stories. And even in just talking to you, you've talked about some of your lessons that you've learned, but I think you just did a great job of helping somebody kind of approach this, from the first steps, and really documenting, hey, w- we're not doing this in a vacuum anymore. Please learn from us. We're begging you to.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons for putting it out there was because if we don't continue to grow, like if we keep it as this little club that some of us act like we have, if we don't let others in and we don't create a welcoming environment, like the industry is going to die. So I the biggest compliment because like I was writing it as a tool for business leaders because one of my challenges, I'm sure y'all have it too, is getting leadership to understand what it takes to produce a VR or AR project. And I feel like a broken wheel all the time, say a broken record, not a broken wheel, broken record, all the time saying the same thing over and over and over. And I'm like, well, maybe I should just put it in a book. And it was a collaboration with my publisher for exactly what it was going to be about. But I wanted to write something that was just literally off the cuff. Like no AI was used in the writing of this book. It says that in the last chapter. Like legit every single word I wrote myself. But it ended up being adopted as a textbook at multiple universities. I think there's at least 12 I've heard of firsthand. Someone's told me they're using it in their course. And it's not
Congratulations.
thank you. It's like not what you'd expect. It's like in business classes about the future of tech. It's in communications about the future of digital communications, like classes that aren't exactly aligned with our industry, but it's exposing a whole new group of people to the technology that is beyond what I was hoping it would do. So and I would also add the worst review I got said on Goodreads said, "This book isn't for developers." And I said, "Well, why'd you give it 2 stars? It's not for developers." Like I took that quote and I used it because I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's not for developers. It's for people who are interested in technology, don't necessarily have a developer background, but want to understand." So, yes, that is a little bit about why I did it.
No, that message rings true to the three of us. I mean, Mark, Ron, and I, and a couple others, Lucky and Mike Van. We all would get together and talk every other week, and we just had great conversations. And when we noticed when we were at AES this past year, Ron and I and a couple others, we had like, if anybody wanted to just come and chat that had read our papers and stuff. And before you know it, we had this eclectic group of people all sitting around talking about integration. They're not talking about the development or talking about this. We're talking about how to use it, how other people have used it. And it's just some great conversations, because I think sometimes I've said this before is that we oftentimes we turn into a show and tell. Look at all the cool things I've done. Look at all the cool things, that my company gets me. And when oftentimes you have people sitting there going, I just want to know where to get started. I remember I met one company last year, name's totally escaping me, but it was a CPG company that was just getting started and they felt so lost that they sat down and ate lunch with Ron and I, and we're just like, all right, here's where you kind of want to start looking at things. And I think a lot of people, that's where they want to go, as well as, you can suffer from FOMO. Everybody's talking about AI, all of us, and you've heard the word agentic being thrown around. Well, now all of a sudden you become the expert on agentic AI. And so I think between the podcast and what you're talking, and what you've shared, it's really providing that audience missing information. So I
Well, thank
preach
you.
about it just because it's my old school teacher in me.
Thank you. No, that means a lot hearing it from you. Thank you.
Oh, all right. I have witnesses that heard that I was influential.
Annie, why'd you have to say that? Why'd you have to say
I know
that?
it's gonna go to his
Um,
head.
just additional to your book too. I'm actually trying to get this in some of our training uh catalogs as well as a PDF so people can download and try it out. But right now in enterprise, right, we have a lot of people shifting, or I call it deck of cards happening, right? And the resource that you wrote is a really great resource to the E suite, the C suite, and be like, hey, well, before we have the conversation, glance this quick for me, right? Because the way you wrote it, right? The voice is not a developer, right? It's not a Unity, how do you develop this tutorial, right? It's really about a practical sort of view of how to approach the technology. So, I think that speaks volumes, right? So much of XR, immersive technology, is around hype, right? And I think part of it is the culture, or it's the silver tongues that still stay in the space, right? Um, and inadvertently, right, that's what discounts the capability of the technology long term, is that people are kind of like, hey, it's a fad, right? Now that Meta stopped subsidizing, oh, it's really not a toy, it's not a gaming console anymore. But meanwhile, you have how many millions of users worldwide? So it goes back to that, the golden handcuffs, and what was considered a successful online business, in 2014 was, if you had 1 million users concurrent per day, it was a successful website. Nowadays, it's like, no, that's not successful. That's a blip, right? So going back, right, it's like having people understand or have a notion or an outline, kind of the way you wrote it. It's just really awesome and really helpful. So good stuff.
Thank you. Well, I'm one of those people who has a lot of trouble reading a book start to finish. So when I was writing it, I intentionally wrote it in short, easy to understand sections. And it also has a beautiful index, so you don't even have to read the whole thing. That was another thing that was important, was just quick access to information in the moment. So if anyone who doesn't want to read a whole book, you can still find value out of it because of that index, and just flipping through what you need when you need it. So hopefully people find that useful too.
Oh, absolutely. And to Mark's point, it gave us a whole new selling point of, instead of saying, all right, have you seen Ready Player One? It now gives us, to me, and especially as I start seeing more literature coming out, it gives legitimacy to me. And especially knowing that it's in college and universities, that is just, as a former teacher, that is absolutely awesome to hear. So I am so excited. And if you're listening and you're questioning where you can get her book, don't worry, we will have links, so you will be able to acquire it. And if you want to catch her at a conference, I'm sure she'll be more than willing to sign it. I've actually witnessed it. She didn't sign mine, but that's okay. She signed everybody else's. But no, so as we're kind of wrapping up, one of the things, Annie, that we really like to do is we're kind of making a joke of the whole protocol, that we live by very loose rules. But there are certain things that we kind of liked that, as we develop and as we've developed our own style of kind of being a change manager and a disruptor, there are certain things that we kind of live by, certain protocols. And so I would love to kind of end this with what's one of your protocols, one of your go-tos that you would like to share that you think has served you well over the years?
Yes. Well, I will say this applies to both my business and my personal life. And it is trusting the combination of your head and your heart, which oftentimes is referred to as your gut check. But I like to break your gut check down into the combination of head and heart, because you do kind of have to have both to really get a sense of something. And whenever I am presented with a new opportunity, I trust that I can do a lot of logical and critical thinking about it, and I can make charts and checklists and really compare if this makes sense for me. But ultimately, the decision on if I'm going to do something or not is going to come from that heart feeling, and making sure that it aligns with me as a person and what I want to do with my life. So, and also with the people around me. A lot of times that heart also includes my team. So is an opportunity just serving me, or is it serving my whole team? So, yes, working on making decisions with your head and your heart.
Nice. That is absolutely awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to spend the night with us, spend the evening with us. Everybody make sure we're spend the evening on on Riverside with us. But no, thank you again for sharing information. Annie, I know you've said numerous times how much you've learned from me, but it's vice versa. It's you really are a just an energetic, fresh voice in this space. Even though you are an OG, it's official. So I told Annie at the end of this she would be officially an OG. So I think she has earned the title. She's going to get the tattoo this weekend.
Maybe so.
And she can always come back and hang out with us miscreants. I mean,
Aw,
experts or whatever word
Absolutely.
Gene used.
Yeah,
thank
anytime,
you.
as Mark said, yeah, anytime if there's something that you want to share or you just want to join and be part of the gallery, you're more than welcome. A seat is always open for you, buddy.
Thank you so much. Thank you. This was super fun.
All right.
We're good, folks. Thank you.